Today we're joined by journalist John Kay and by lawyer Ryan O'Connor, who both have views on this topic from different perspectives. So thank you both so much for joining me today. Now, Mr. Kay, let me start with you. You recently outlined on Twitter what you call the conservative or libertarian case for vaccine passports. Can you tell me what that is?
Well, yeah. So my take on it is that if you're a libertarian, if you're a small government conservative, you want private actors, civil society, employers, local groups, everything from sports teams to maybe sort of local governments instead of one-size-fits-all solutions from government. You want the solutions to be flexible and not just one monolithic government mandate. I argue that so-called vaccine passports, though they don't always go by the name, sometimes they're called certificates or whatnot. What they do is they give people information, and not just government officials. In fact, they're primarily designed so that if you run an amusement park, or you run a movie theater, or you run a restaurant, or transportation, or your employer, you can make those decisions based on a uniform information standard. Even most libertarians, I think, accept the idea that government is properly in the business of, say, enforcing contracts or determining what weights and measures should be standardized or what currency we should be allowed to accept. Governments maintain property registers, internet domain registries, stuff like that. And real passports that we use to travel. I think most people recognize that that's a proper role for government. Just because governments have a monopoly on giving people passports doesn't mean they get to decide where you can travel. So for me, it's a tool that will allow private decision makers, from employers to civic groups, maybe churches or synagogues may say you can only come on Saturday or Sunday if you're fully vaccinated. I think ultimately, eventually, that should be their decision to make. And ideally, the passport would be a uniform benchmark standard that would allow them to make those decisions for themselves.
So, Mr. O'Connor, I know you, and I think you'd call yourself sort of a conservative, libertarian inclined. What do you think the case is against vaccine passports?
Well, I think fundamentally, a mandatory vaccine passport policy is essentially the government permitting itself to do something through the back door that it can't do through the front door, and that's to coerce effectively vaccination. Mandatory vaccine passports are a cudgel with which to beat the vaccine hesitant, those who, for perhaps religious reasons, conscience reasons, medical reasons, or reasons of a disability that they might experience. It's a cudgel with which to beat them into getting vaccinated. That's problematic from a freedom perspective. It's problematic from a security of the person perspective. But aside from those philosophical issues, the policies that they've been implemented in the case of Manitoba, British Columbia, and soon to be in Ontario are oftentimes irrational. For example, even in the Ontario proposal, you have a situation where employees are not required to be vaccinated at vaccine passport mandated facilities such as restaurants and gyms, but patrons are. So there's an irrationality aspect to it that's problematic. But at the end of the day, we know from the data that individuals who are vaccinated can still contract and spread COVID. And if the premise of the policy is to prevent the transmission of COVID in the community, I'm not quite certain that a mandatory vaccine passport policy is going to actually affect the change that government wants to see.